We couldn't go with the plan, but we'll get there. We've done this a few times before, and that is we've tried to open this up to have a discussion and a sharing point. And I will take notes also because on some of these because we want to use them. So my name is Tom Devine, WB2ALJ. I am currently the Southern New Jersey Section Emergency Coordinator. So I kind of picked some of these topics, but they also came out of our planning group, and because we were planning these as something to do during some of our pre-programs. So if I may, I'll bring up the topic, and then we're going to do this a little bit different. If we can not speak up, you can speak, but we just don't want to step on each other, that's all. Okay, first one we'll talk about. What future ECOMM presentation topics would you like? This team has a planning team that meets weekly. I have the pleasure of being part of it, along with some other people on here, and we are always seeking input. Well, Thursday nights are our emergency communication night. We try to do something in emergency communications every Thursday night, and or related to it. So we're opening it up to you and let you make some suggestions to us. And we can't guarantee anything because, as happened here, sometimes it's out of our control for a little while. And we'd have to do some research. It does take time to get it set up, and we work on a pretty long lead time schedule whenever we can. Okay, so what are your ideas? It's open to any comments and suggestions, and just please one at a time.
Tom, this is Stephen.
Hi, Stephen.
How you doing? And welcome, everybody. I think what I would really like to hear is people who have been there and done that. People that have actually, been at incidents and deployed. I mean, you guys may have already presented some of those, and unfortunately I missed them, but a couple of those here and there I think would be fantastic. People that have actually had real life experiences and what came up, what worked, what didn't. I know we can all read the AARs, but actually having someone here to be able to answer questions I think would be really, really nice, because I got a bunch of them.
Okay. I appreciate that very much. We have done a little bit of that, and that's a great topic to continue. I appreciate it, Stephen, and thank you for the email today. I'll get back to you. All right, somebody else. That's a good one.
Tom, this is Dan.
Hi, Dan.
Get hold of the YouTube presentation of the last one of the Comm Academy presentations. It was somebody who had, shall I say, genuine experience in the ICS world using amateur radio operators in Alberta, Canada. A spectacularly good presentation.
Thank you. I will just say that is on our agenda for next week, that working with the Comm Academy. Somebody's already working on that, so we will add that one to the list.
Cool beans. I never expected I'd have to run so hard to catch up with y'all.
Well, it just so happened I was reading my emails today. Okay, who else has got one? Thanks, Dan. Since when has emergency communications people been so silent?
Well, they got a lot going between their ears. There's just not coming out of their mouth right now.
I put one in chat.
Well, okay, I can't see chat while I'm doing this, Tom, so I recognize your voice. So tell to us what it is, because you may stimulate somebody else.
I'd like to see something on complete readiness rather than just radio readiness. I pulled a little gag on our team here. Now, this was a while ago, and I said, bring your deployment kit. I didn't say radio kit, your deployment kit to the meeting. And what they all showed up with was radio kits. And I mean, to a man, to a woman, everybody showed up with radio kits. And I said, I don't see any toilet paper on these tables. And that started the discussion off because the expectation that the emergency management compact principle and the most of the states have is that any responder under a disaster should be prepared to self-sustain without any help from the relief effort itself for a minimum of 72 hours. And many of them want 120 hours. They want 5 solid days of self-sustainment. And, you know, people have to pay attention to that and be prepared to sustain themselves until the relief effort's up to speed, because otherwise you're a burden on the relief effort.
Yeah, good point. Good point. And that's a topic that might be a good one to bring up, even as one of these pre-session discussion topics, and let everybody input their own. That'll be good. Okay. Anybody else got something or something to add to what we've already talked about? I see Barry popped up. You have something, Barry?
Tom, UDT.
Yes. How you
I
doing?
have one following up to what Tom TDH said.
Yeah.
Was that what about Go Kits?
Okay. We just recently had a discussion about Go Kits a little bit and in preparation, but that's a good one to keep on. Okay.
Who's got the hammer going? Sound like they're beating up on a steak for dinner.
I'm sorry, I'll mute. That's Julie in the kitchen chopping up chickens for the dogs.
Okay.
I have a suggestion.
Go right ahead. Speak up.
My name's Ken, NU3A in Delaware. You know, we talk a lot about ourselves being prepared and ready to go and be deployed and such. You might want to talk a little bit about what you do to keep your family ready while you're going to be gone, because obviously if they're not settled, you're going to have a hard time pulling yourself away to take care of any other situation.
Excellent. That's a good topic. That's a good topic.
There's a very good resource on that on ready.gov responder. Okay, because it's aimed at the first responders, but that doesn't mean it's bad information. ReadyResponder.gov, I think, is the correct order. And it's information on getting your family and yourself ready so that when you have to respond, you leave your family and everything else you're responsible for in good shape. A great resource. Not the end of the world, but a good start place.
It's a start plan. Good. Thanks, Tom. Okay, what else do we have? So there's nothing else you guys want to hear at all about ECOMM?
Hang on till she chops up a couple of more chickens. I'll be back with some comments and questions.
Okay. Last night we had a very good presentation on RF exposure, but I don't know, I think I would like to, at some point when they get this whole thing going, I'd like to have an idea, what about RF exposure? How do we figure it out, and how should we be concerned about it with emergency setups? Is there anything we have to worry about?
We're working on that now in terms of setting up our standard kinds of mast and so forth, and then calculating from the equipment that everybody expects to bring to make sure there's nothing over the top. So is a 20-foot mast in, say, the middle of a parking lot enough, because that's an uncontrolled area, enough to keep the people you're trying to help safe? And, you know, trying to start from, well, we put up 20s, we put up 30s, we put up 40s, and how much power are we putting out of them? Well, we might put on a 40 in a beam, and if the terrain's not perfectly level, we might aim too much energy uphill in trying to reach a repeater or a target So we're beginning to work on, we've got some people that are brilliant, unlike me, at calculating that sort of thing, and they're beginning to help me with calculations of our ordinarily used things. And then we're also going to tell our people that if you're not using a standard setup that we've practiced and used before, that you're responsible to pre-calculate it before you bring it. One guy showed up for a drill with a foot warmer that would kick out 1,000 watts on 2 meters. That raised immediate concerns among all of us, because the minimum mast I could see on that would be a 40-footer, and maybe better still, a 50 or greater. That's a lot of power to put around a lot of people. So the idea is to make people aware and tell them you don't want to be out in the field trying to figure out if the rig you brought and the antenna you brought and the support for it you brought is safe for the people you went there to help. You want to calculate it before you go, so that when you get there, you already know that it's safe because of the way it's set up.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Michelle posted something in chat. Should I read it?
Oh, yeah.
Please, because it may stimulate discussion for somebody else.
Okay. What can experimental nerds do to help EMCOMM? We can't exactly math our way through an emergency. What can we do to help? Comments?
Topic.
Yep.
I got the perfect person to be the presenter, though. The planning committee knows that joke. Okay.
And there's another request on how the FCC regulations are going to affect field day setups. And I don't think they answered that last night, because I don't think they had the answer yet.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. I'll write that down. As Tom was speaking, during field days, you get extra points, if I remember right, for a group setup if you have a safety person. And that is maybe what ECOM units under major projects or major disaster setups might want to do, is appoint one person as a safety person. That is an idea that would go along with it. Okay, who else has got ideas?
Well, ARRL could change the points for field day so that the less power you use, there's some sort of multiplier for points by way of minimizing the aggregate RF exposure, be it controlled or uncontrolled, at a field day site. Personally, I think field day is kind of counterproductive to practicing emergency deployments for obvious reasons, but it's better than not doing anything at all away from your QTH.
Yeah, I understand your point. Okay. All right, let's see if we have any other good ideas out there. Now, we're also always looking for suggested speakers if anybody wants to volunteer or contact us. And if you have suggestions of a speaker, we're pretty good at tracking people down. We try our best, but we're always looking for suggestions. So we're just really looking for the ECOM here. What do you want? I would expect more comments from this group.
One thing is, I want to know how many of you are old enough, in other words, as old as me, to remember the old version of the 27-hour rule, not the present one where you can go 3 hours later after everybody disappears, but the one you had to begin setup only 3 hours ahead, and then you could use all the time between when you got your first radio on the air and the end of field day. And it led to the development of the PUP generator, which was a very useful thing for EMCOMM. It led to people learning to bring adapters to throw more extensive antennas right off their car antenna mount, and for people learning to bring power for mobile units that wasn't running an 8-cylinder or 6-cylinder engine back in the day, now it's a 4-cylinder engine, just to run a radio. Because, you only had 3 hours lead to start up. You couldn't set up before that. But as soon as you got radios on the air, you could begin. So it was a good kick for EMCOMM. It was, it made you learn how to set up efficiently and quickly and to know what you were doing. But the present 27-hour rule where you start at the regular time and can go 3 hours later, absolutely useless, because all the people you might contact have fallen over dead after 24 hours of radio.
Okay. Anybody else got a topic? I can change the topics. All right.
Okay.
Go ahead, Steve. Steve, go ahead.
Okay. I would like to have something about what FEMA's expectations are for emergency managers in emergency plans, if they have anything there about amateur radio being a resource that should be considered, because we have some emergency managers that include us and think we're great, and others not so much. So I'm kind of curious what guidance they get.
Very interesting topic. I can't add to that or subtract from that, but I'll write down the. I know the first not FirstNet, but SafeComm, when that was written a few years ago, amateur radio was written in as a backup. And that's one that's part of the training that we give. But I'll make a note of that. Thank you very much, Steve.
Dan has his hand up.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. So, how do I say this? Old habits die hard, and as a retired Fed, I read way too much output from FEMA. And what I'm doing is I'm looking for any kind of lifeline inclusion, specifically in their current dicta that specifies amateur radio. And it's almost as if they're avoiding it. There have been a series of 1-hour webinars discussing with representatives of authorities having jurisdiction of how to make use of volunteer amateur radio operators. And that doesn't really sound like they're planning to use ARES as a deployable resource, but rather there's I don't know if it's still a current course, but there's one of the professional development series courses for how to manage volunteers. And that keeps surfacing as something that you have to do in every large incident without specific reference to amateur radio operators. So I think we have a problem that needs to be worked on in that sense. Another thing is I noticed an announcement today that ARRL and the American Red Cross renewed their MOU. And if it wasn't about number 9 in my stack of must do right now, I'd have read it by now. But I'm curious about that. There's some discordance between what a lot of people that participate in these meetings are actually doing because they're professional or paraprofessional emergency managers versus the vast majority of ARES volunteers. And unless we can clear that confusion up, I'm not sure we're going to be real successful in growing the next generations of, qualified, deployable, mutual aid capable amateurs. That could be my own paranoia, though.
We can't give up, Dan. We have to. We have to take. It's a good. The whole concept of how FEMA ties in and how amateur radio ties in is a very important subject. So I don't know the answer, but we might be able to figure out something, and maybe we can get somebody to talk on it. We'll try.
So, some groups are doing a spectacular job, but you know who they are and where they're doing it. I'm just talking about on a nationally supported level. God forbid that has some funding like CERT does, but we've got work to do.
You just brought up a topic. Maybe we could get various groups to discuss what they do. and how effective it is. And
I can reach out to some of the, well, Sid Caesar. He's a CERT program manager, and I think, you know, an ARRL official for something, well enmeshed in the EMS world. And I think it's going to be relationships like that that will make it happen. Actually, for some reason in California, I think it's I don't know if it's a FEMA grant, but there's some money there for hospitals that do exercises, and I think in SoCal now they're going to do one just to see how. Oh no, it's one of our counties, Stanislaus County. They're going to be they're waiting for the medical health operational area coordinator to tell them what traffic they're going to pass where between hospitals. Because that's the kind of use that is traditionally very recognized, and they have specific needs. And is that emergency communications? It sure is if your hospital's fiber is cut and or your phone lines are down. So that kind of thing, but it's going to vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And, you know, I remember when on missions in Alaska, we had a 3-day pack, and you had your homesteading duffel bag before they'd let you on a military plane and transport you on a search and rescue mission, if you weren't military. So.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, anyone else before I change the subject?
Yes,
Go ahead, Tom.
one thing that everybody needs to know is that our resource has yet to be typed. And that is the do-all and end-all of ordering resources within FEMA. Until radio is typed as a resource and a radio team is typed as a resource, a person may desperately want a particular type of radio support, but there's no way within the FEMA ordering and requisition system to order that resource, because they can order a fire truck because it's typed and categorized. They can order a search and rescue team for the same reason. They can order a set of mass transport buses, same reason. They can order a wildfire strike team, an urban strike team, an urban interface strike team for the same reason. They're typed. Radio is yet to be typed, and until that's overcome, both in FEMA's algorithm and in the Emergency Management Compact, which maybe a few of you don't know is the Interstate Mutual Aid Agreement. It's called the Emergency Management Compact. It's the way states can help each other without waiting for the feds to get involved. It isn't operated through FEMA, it's just state to state. But they're using the same sort of typing catalogs and things that FEMA is using. And if they don't have a way to say, I need a this within that system, that means 1 operator, 10 operators, and to do what? Do they need 20 operators to ride trucks and serve as a substitute communication for the vehicles? Or do they need 5 operators to unite 5 counties? And if the terrain is challenging, do they need for rough terrain? Because you don't tell them, am I going to need NVIS? That's over their heads in our specialty. But if they get to say, well, I need interstation radio operators for mountainous terrain or hilly terrain, and that's a typed resource, then we know what they want and we can deliver it. But until the resource is typed, we're out in the cold.
That's an interesting topic. Where do we fit? In ICS, we fit in one place. In the emergency plans, we fit in another. I mean, we should be ESF2. You know, we should have boxes in ESF2. But under the ICS, we fit into resources. And the resources people don't want us. So it's difficult for us to break out of that until the feds decide where exactly do we place amateur radio in the whole emergency operation schedule. And until that gets resolved, we're going to have a great deal of difficulty, at least on the federal level. And I know in the state of Florida, we're ESF2. The counties? No, in some of the counties, we come under resources where they really don't want us, but the state says we belong in communications. So there's a huge conflict, and I'm sure that's in other states too. And once we get typed and we have an official box in a real place, we're not going to get any place because we're going to be overlooked. So that could be a good topic to bring up.
Barry, Resource Typing Toolkit ID 5-508-1247, Land Mobile Radio Support Team. And somebody else worries about the transport. These guys just do the communications.
Mm-hmm.
So it is typed, so to speak. Probably varies radically from state to state.
It varies from state to state. And so that's why the feds need to decide exactly where we belong, so the states can comply with that.
Well, but it is a typed resource, Land Mobile Radio Support Team 1.
Mm-hmm. That's in California, though.
No, this is FEMA. This is FEMA.
Okay, but that's Land Mobile, too. That's not amateur radio, is it?
Well, bingo. Hello. Ring the bell.
Yep. I mean, it would be great if we could have our own box, have an amateur radio type in FEMA. That would solve a lot of the problems that we're having right now.
They even have different component types, 1 through 4 for different kinds of teams.
Mm-hmm.
And NIMS-COM L, NIMS-COM T. There's no radios though, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. So that would be good, something good to copy for us.
And I have to disagree on one point. Not trying to be quarrelsome, Barry, but you want to be the same kind of resource any other resource providing such a team would be, because if you set yourself aside as amateur radio in FEMA's world, you're saying things you don't want to say.
Tom, 80% of us would not qualify medically to deploy with some kinds of teams like this. There are specific areas where we're as valuable as could be, because we free up those people who are in fact trained responders, who are paid to risk their lives and train every day.
I just mentioned the radio realm. If you separate amateur radio from another provider of radio operators, just on account of, because I don't see that as productive, and maybe I'm wrong. I think if you can provide the resource, then the category you just steered us to should fit. And if you can't, what the hell good are you?
Yeah. So I think the difference is all the other resources, a search and rescue team, 10 fire trucks, everybody else brings their own communications.
That's true.
So why would you want a unit that was there to bring additional communications if everyone already has their communications?
Well, during Hurricane Maria, a couple of these Type 1 teams would have been real handy to spread around the fire stations in addition to the amateur radio operators.
If I may, in Region 5, which is essentially Federal Region, Wildfire Region 5 is the same as California. The borders are synonymous. In Region 5, they have been using amateurs as a separate resource. And then somebody recently said we don't need them, and the rest of Region 5 walked down their throats with combat boots on, because in the wildfires, a lot of the resources, not for the mobile rigs to the mobile rigs, but for the mobile rigs to the wider portions of the state, were burned out because the fiber went out between the towers, and you had to substitute other radios. Now, some of what was substituted was shares, but somewhat was substituted with amateur radio. And it's just a matter of who'll bring the resources to do the job. And if I may, that gets me into something else when you're ready.
Okay, now.
If you lower your hand, you'll stop being in top left as if you still wanted to speak.
All right. Your conversation stimulated something in my mind that I want to throw out here. What about amateur radio, emergency service, mutual assistance teams?
the thing is that if we can get all of the sections on the same page as to what that means, and I'm going to be brutally frank here, in some sections it means who have I worked with on contests that I like their operating skills, not can this person function in a screwed up emergency environment. Okay, there's too many different views of what's okay to put on a mutual assistance team, and that has to be standard nationwide.
In your area of the country, there is a definition, Tom.
Say again?
Because I'm on the team that's working on the definition.
Right. Okay. And the other thing that glares at me is that they're putting together a MAP team in, or part of one anyway, in Maryland, DC section. And part of the section, part of the division, part of the Atlantic division, says, well, if you come up here to help us, you need to know how to do the narrowband emergency message system. We don't use WinLink. Now, that's about as stupid an approach as I can imagine in emergency communications. I know that a lot of high frequency operators have a hostility to WinLink for a variety of reasons, some of which are valid. But if we're not going to use WinLink, we should all not use it and learn something else. And, you know, expecting people to know your favorite local data stream technique is totally unrealistic. So something's got to be done about those.
Yeah, what I'm trying to say is that a topic? And there are some bumps in that road, but cooler minds will take him and make him a little bit better. Go ahead, Dan.
Okay, so in California, Cal OES calls the shots on how amateur radio operators are going to be integrated into the state's emergency response system. And it's not the fact they're amateur radio operators or that they have their own equipment. It's the fact that they know how to do communications and can use the state's equipment and work with people who are from all walks of life, not just amateur radio operators. Almost every time I deployed with Cal OES, the commercial satellite systems that were on scene way outclassed what Cal OES could stand up. And these commercial rigs were part of the Cal OES auxiliary communication system. In other states, you're not doing emergency communications unless you're on the AUXCOM list for that state. Apparently, even if you're a paid state employee. So, I mean, how do I say it? Aries is a solution that doesn't have a problem, it fits.
Okay. All right. Is there any other topics for this, or I'll move to the next topic because we have several topics we can talk about. And I just want to get everybody's input on future discussions.
Well, I've got one that I would certainly like to see.
Go ahead, John.
Well, I have a mantra when I'm talking to agencies and potential serve agencies and what have you, and that it's not about the radio. We've got 3 different stations and hospitals around here. I figure I'm as savvy as any old fart about radios. They have 3 different radios that they bought over the years. I think one's an ICOM, one's a Yaesu, one's a Kenwood. I would be hard pressed to go in at the request of a hospital and actually use that HF radio, get it on the air in a reasonable length of time. I've told them I'll be happy to help. There are several folks here who could help, but I'll bring my own radio. I think one of the issues is there is such a spectrum of ham radios. Just think of the handhelds. That's a hindrance to putting together an effective team in a short period of time. And candidly, when I'm talking to a hospital or they're asking me about what kind of radio to buy, I say, don't buy one. I say, put in an antenna, put in a good antenna, put in power, put in a communication capability, and let the HF ham or the VHF ham bring his own radio because he knows how to use it. And I think that's a significant barrier. And I tell you what, when I brought that up, and they say, well, you're the first ham who's ever told us we need to do something right away, or the thing that we need to do right away is buy a radio. So I think you can see the kind of furball that I see out there with so many different kinds of radios, and being able to adapt and, let's say, be a bench operator for a station you're not familiar with. That's a nightmare.
Good point. Good point. Very good. Thank you.
Gordon
Thank you,
and Dan
John.
have their hands up.
Who's that?
Gordon and Dan have their hands up.
Okay. Gordon, go ahead. Thank you, Tom.
Can you hear me okay?
Sure, Gordon.
So, you know, I assume that when an authority having jurisdiction wants to requisition people to work for them, they probably don't want a group, they probably want volunteers. So I think maybe individuals are more appropriate than areas as such. It would seem to me that we would want to have a class of trained people who can basically walk in and use whatever the agency needs done. I suspect they have a station license or have equipment. If they don't, they might ask us to bring something, but I would assume the ComL decides, I don't have a lot of knowledge of this, so please correct me, but I would assume the ComL has an idea how he wants communications to be done. I predict that's what he's trained for. And I guess my job is to be able to do whatever he wants. And it would seem to me that perhaps we should train to meet that need, but maybe I'm all wrong.
Okay. Training to meet the needs. Yeah.
I think one of the issues there is in wildland fire, a ComL has a very distinct role in things that are expected from them. Whereas in all hazards, many agencies having jurisdiction don't normally use a ComL. They don't know quite what they see their role as only handing out radios to units for some reason that didn't have enough portables. And they've been and because they always operate the same way, they never have to do the 205 for each incident, so on and so forth. So it's communications is kind of the red-haired stepchild for most emergency responders.
Okay. All right. We got a lot of topics. Let me move on to the next topic in the list. I want to pay attention. We've talked on this about 40 minutes, which is great. Okay. Move on to the next. What are your creative training exercises to enhance your team skills? Now, we're looking at, this is an opportunity for you to say what's worked for you. Could somebody like to give a try?
I've got something for the group.
Thank you, John. I'm glad somebody put it backed up.
I got I'm from Onslow County, North Carolina, which is in Hurricane Alley. And one of the things that we do on our Thursday Aries Net, which just got done prior to this, is a lot of us have our radios programmed for the frequencies we're kind of used to, specifically repeaters. So a lot of times to bounce from duplex over to simplex and other scenarios like that are sometimes difficult. So one of the things we do is simulate all the repeaters being down. And so we subdivide the county into a net controller for, northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest. And those guys all report to one net controller, basically a chain of command, and basically it just establishes comms through the region. So I thought that was kind of a neat trick. And you'd be surprised how many people don't know how to program their HTs or their bench tops on the fly. Over.
Excellent. I got one question for you. Do you use the output of your repeater as one of those simplex frequencies if you lose your repeater?
I think they did do that. I think they did it both ways. They try and do it, I think, maybe monthly or quarterly. And I think they've tried different variants and different stations, right? Because some guys have really nice towers. They may really be, I don't want to use the word a nobody, but they may be a low player, but they probably have the best station out of an area. And so even though they may not want the responsibility, a lot of times they say, hey, look, look, so-and-so, you're going to be able to reach this area. We need you to, take responsibility in this kind of scenario. So I thought it was kind of interesting.
Good. Thank you. I went through that particular exercise in the county I'm on an areas team in, and it works very effectively because we can't communicate from one end of the county to the other on simplex. You go down to the southern end of our section, you can. Great idea. Okay, what else do we have? We
set up for a 4th of July parade here, which seemed a perfect place. We set up a ham mesh network across the entire route and operational area, and then handed out Cisco, I think, EOFP phones to the marshals of the various sections. And because we had that network up, and we had to pull in several guys from the organization who could deal with the IP addresses and so forth, which isn't all of us. So you have to make sure you have at least one of those key people along. But the marshals were at first delighted, and then then somebody started talking about, well, does this mean we don't need you? And I said, well, who's going to set the network up for you? Who's going to take care of a node that some turkey crashes into and knocks down? Who's going to keep it running? And that was very interesting. They took it well, but since then we haven't put the effort up to do it again and again. We only did it that 1 year. The other thing we did with the same kinds of techniques was give them video of a couple of key points that they asked the same questions about every year over and over and over again. Well, has so-and-so passed your location? Well, we gave them a video link to that location 1 year, and all of a sudden they weren't asking that repeated question. They would look. They knew what order their units were in because that's the way they were organized. So by looking at the unit in front of their camera, they know whether the one they were interested in is before or behind them, and didn't have to ask that same question over and over again. That proved its worth when in the middle of them trying to track a unit and not needing to ask that question, one of the floats took fire, and I mean dramatically took fire. It wasn't an overheated engine. And because the frequency was clear, the amateur radio unit with that particular section of the parade got immediate access to say, I've got a float on fire and the location, and we're getting the people off there now. And fire and rescue units in the parade came about and came to their assistance and got it out before it became a threat to everybody. And that's pretty wildly necessary when the float happens to be carrying propane.
Thanks, Tom. How about other exercises? While Tom was talking about that, I thought of one where there was a situation in part of a simulated emergency test operation where we had linked repeaters that were linked through the internet. And I had them turned off to force people to use other communications other than a link repeat. Has anybody else used something like that? And
all the time.
Okay, so what's the exercise, Barry?
Forcing simplex and forcing relays. So people learn how to relay message traffic voice-wise and also digitally. We need a lot of our agencies are requiring us to do more digitally. So we have to learn how to do it in simplex digitally to be able to get stuff done and to be able to relay it via whatever means the particular digital system has to relay messages up and down to wherever it needs to go. It's important because more and more people are requiring it, and a lot of resistance in the ham community to doing that.
Thank you. That is a good one. Last simulated emergency test that I wrote, we had, they had to send in their final summary report to me by digital communications. I didn't say which type, because in the area where we are, there's a lot of activity with MBIS, even at the HF level, VHF level, and there was growing interest in WinLink at that time. So we said, we don't care what format, just get it to us digitally. Dale.
That's the whole point. We have a message to pass. Doesn't matter how it's passed. Right. Message has to get through in a timely manner and accurately.
Right. Thank you, Barry. Dale, did you have something you wanted to add? I saw your picture pop up on the screen.
Oh, well, not until just now, but I live on the Cascadia fault line up there on the Olympic Peninsula, and we are shutting down the repeater function and using the peer-to-peer and mailbox storage and alternate bands and everything possible to get a realistic approach to no repeater functioning and passing messages that way.
Great. And that's a good idea too. Use peer-to-peer WinLink and stuff like that. That ties in with what Barry was saying digitally, because that is, we get more accuracy and we get speed. Here again, different parts of the country use different formats right now, and that's okay. They have reasons, and there is, that's okay. And my attitude is just get them step by step, get them go do some kind of digital anyway. Good.
The other thing, Tom, is if we're going to do exercises, we can't just do check-in exercises. We can't do the drills and stuff that we've been doing for a long time by ourselves. We had Dr. Gibby on a couple of weeks ago to tell us how to do a FEMA-compliant exercise. We need to do local exercises according to the rules that they're setting up, which means it's measurable, it's deliverable, and all of that. What we're doing right now is wasting our time in a lot of these until we start to get it up to what was it, HSSEP or whatever the initials are. I can't think of it right now. We need to comply with those to get our people so they're used to doing stuff that's measurable and actionable, so that we can see what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. And our agencies are going to recognize, because our agencies recognize everything that comes out of those kinds of drills. Doing a ham radio drill like an SCT without that is really wasting all of our time.
Good point. Good point. That's a good topic right there in the future, is how to prepare a good exercise.
Right.
How to prepare it. And it takes time. It takes a lot of time and a lot of planning to do them. They can't be done quickly.
Tom?
Go ahead.
If you look at the top or the left-hand end of your display of people, I don't know whether you're keeping yours on the right side or the top. The top or the left hand is where you'll find people who have their hand up. Dan's had his hand up for like 3 go-rounds now, waiting to be recognized.
Okay, if I'm watching my screen.
Dan's hand is in the back of, it's on a white part of his house, so it's very difficult to see that his hand is raised. But I do see that it's raised.
Dan, go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to lower my digital hand.
Okay.
I can't take credit for any of this, but what I've seen this last year and a half or 2 years is sections are not limiting their exercises to within the section. Counties are not limiting their exercises to within the county or a district or a single EC. Everybody in California, at least, with a small exception of some outlier Red Cross aficionados, is perfectly content to get on board with what is the most prevalent digital mode, which is WinLink. And there are WinLink exercises going on 3 or 4 days a week across the country. And the check-in exercises do have value, especially when the net report comes out showing which call sign came via which routes on which frequencies through which gateways. There you have a living map of what to do if during the next week communications fails and we got to start moving lots of volumes of traffic. And also, well, I'm just going to stop there. But again, we're never going to come up with a single paradigm that's going to fit every state or jurisdiction in the country. And it seems like all of our conversations go towards how can we get everybody doing Homeland Security exercise and evaluation program stuff, which is valuable. And if you're going to work with authorities having jurisdiction that are getting the FEMA funding grants because they're doing that, then it makes sense to do that. There's nothing wrong with learning it and using it. But the point is, each exercise that anybody does, even if it's you goes 10 miles this way, you go 10 miles that way, you goes 10 miles that way, we'll try VHF and UHF with a mag mount, we'll try it with a better installed NMO mount, and we'll try it with a push-up mast. And we'll log how that works so that in a local community, actually our Fresno EC did that this past weekend, and listening to the comments about it was real gratifying. We try to do a couple of NVIS exercises a year on 40 and 60 actually, because we're not going to do much at night. And it's been gratifying to see where people from adjoining sections heard about it and just checked in. We set up 3 or 4 net control stations that take a 45-minute or 1 hour block of time, and they put out calls, and everybody's real orderly, and they log them. And people are learning how to get the word out. Amateur radio does what amateur radio does in emergencies. How structured it is, how well trained they are, influences how effective they are. But what we need to do is rally that willingness and turn it into organized professional communications that we can advertise without being embarrassed to the authorities having jurisdiction. I feel like I'm singing the same mantra and saying it as many different ways as I can.
Thank you, Dan. I think we all kind of agree. We just have to get a way to communicate that so it's heard by the right people, and you got to say things multiple times. Stephen, KC3DSO. Didn't mean to miss you, Stephen, and I know you're not quiet. Somehow you're not connected.
Okay, how's that?
You're fine. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So bottom line is not really what I would call a creative training exercise, but we learned to stop giving plans for our drills. So no more. People are told, look, we're going to have a drill on Thursday night starting at 18:30, and that's it. They know to check into our local repeater, and what they're done is they're giving tasks. You got to send this message to this group of people or to this person, and they can decide how it's done, whether it's done through HF RDOP or HF Vera or Vera FM or whatever the case may be. And it works out pretty good. This forces them to make decisions. Sometimes we'll take nodes down, we'll take digis down and make them do a couple of hops, relays through multiple stations to get it to the southern part of the county. And that's worked out pretty good for us. We're a heavy WinLink group here in the Maryland, DC section with a couple of very minor exceptions. But so we do a lot of peer-to-peer work and HF Vera and things like that. And we used to write these plans telling people what to do, when to do it, when to wipe their butt, when to get up and go get a snack and things like that. And it was just not a good thing to do. You were leading people around by the nose. You got to have people with the ability to be given a task and be able to figure it out and get the message through. So, and that's worked out well for us. So it's not really a creative training exercise. It's just something we changed in our thinking for our members.
Stephen, thank you. I was criticized the last time because I did just that in part of the exercise and I let the locals decide how they wanted to do it, and they wanted specific instructions. And my attitude is, I'm going to do more of it this time because they got me last time, so I'll do more of it this time and make them do more. So good point.
Yeah.
I'm going to use it.
Yeah, well, you know, this is what's going to happen. If something happens, they're going to be sent to one of our hospitals or a shelter, and they're not going to be told what's going to be going on in advance. You know,
Well,
we're pampering them, you know.
and I'll pick on you for a minute, Stephen, because we know each other a little bit. I think that the next set should also involve our regional Aries Met team. Think about that one for a while.
I agree. I've already talked to the SEC here in Maryland.
Okay, Gordon, you had your hand up next that I saw.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not a FEMA expert, but there's a little bit of terminology that we might want to get right. I'm not sure why this has not already percolated through all of ARRL, but HSEP is the way to get the attention of authorities having jurisdiction in my tiny amount of experience. We just got a letter of appreciation today from a county commissioner group who were very appreciative of something that was done in their county. In HSEP, everything should be done to focus on a core capability of FEMA, and there are 32 of them, and amateur radio or other communications address many of those core capabilities. So it's not hard to demonstrate that what you're doing has direct national capability applicability. Then there are multiple kinds of exercises, and a lot of people are talking about things that are called drills, and drills are fine, and I think drills have a big place in getting people trained, but eventually you have to move on to a full-scale exercise where you're not just testing one capability, but you're testing multiple capabilities and multiple different means of communications. And I think people need to be perhaps precise in their language of whether they're talking about a drill exercise, a functional, there's a lot of different names for them. At any rate, the next thing is that the things that I think, I forget the name, but I think it was Stephen was talking about, those are excellent. Those are called injects. And that's FEMA speak for how you run an exercise. When you throw stuff at people that's unexpected, it's called an inject. And that's what makes an exercise fun and much more rewarding and much more useful. And I have been reminded by many people in my section to be certain that we do not have the amateur radio operators dreaming up the communications. In the vast majority of cases, we are not the people who signs the exercise message. We are the persons who transmit it. That's it. And so it's difficult but important to either have actual persons providing the content or to have simulated content that's provided in the form of an inject. And those that can be done over the radio, they can be done through back channels, as the American Red Cross group tends to do, or they can be done by envelopes, they can be done by encrypted messages. There's a wide variety of ways to do them. But that's what makes an exercise fun. And it's a lot of work, but it's well worth it. That's it.
Okay, Gordon, that's a good point. It brings up the topic of FEMA terminology, as well as how it ties into the exercise process. Good. Dennis, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Let's see if you got audio from me this time.
Yes,
Hopefully
sir.
You're hearing me. Good. Well, along the lines of some of the discussion going on here, I wanted to share something with my experiences in Orange County. That's Orange County, California, where we supported, the group I was with supported about 30, 31, 32 receiving hospitals in Orange County. It was a large group. We had about 100 members. We would participate in the countywide exercises, if you want to call them exercises or drills. And these were all inclusive. This included Orange County Fire Authority, city fire departments, city police departments, Orange County Sheriff, ambulance companies, everything. It was a full-blown drill. And of course, we were part of that. We were also included as part of the planning. But one of the things that we did for a little bit more realistic approach to how we would respond to one of our AHJs is that we wouldn't pre-deploy people at a facility. In other words, you don't put, if an emergency happens, if a disaster happens, it takes you time to get there. And so the drill starts, we don't have our people ready to go sitting in the hospital ready to start communicating. It's important to not do that, because you've got to that gives the hospital unrealistic expectations. So we would typically stage somewhere where we couldn't be seen by hospital staff. And we'd wait for a call from our net control to report in. And it would usually be somewhere in the range of like half an hour to an hour after the exercise began. And that's a much more realistic way to approach responding to an AHJ like that. Because you're not going to be there instantly. It's going to take you time to get there, especially like in the case of when we had our big earthquake out here, and then other folks have gone through this too, where you're checking on your family and your home and all of that first. You have to make sure that's all okay. Then you can deploy. And for me here, it takes me about 30 minutes to get to the hospital from where I am living right here. So, you know, that you have to have a realistic deployment time. So just wanted to throw that out there. It's just part of making an exercise a little bit more realistic to your AHJ, again, so that you don't give them unfair expectations of what amateur radio is going to do in an emergency response.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Stephen, you had your hand up and then it went down. I don't know if...
Yeah, it was up earlier. We took care of it. I'm good to go.
Okay, thank you.
Does Dan still have his hand up? I can't tell.
It's up again. I put it up again.
Okay.
Oh, okay. It's hard to see it with the sun coming in behind you, Dan. Okay. All right, go ahead, Dan.
Let me drop my hand first so we don't forget. So I'm impressed with what Steve said. I'm impressed with what a lot of you said. And the takeaway for me is something I've been observing, which is we don't go to the AHJs and say, we're an amateur radio emergency services group. Here's what we can do for you. We go to them and say, what can we do for you? And then we pay very close attention because we need them to know that we do radio, but we want them to tell us what they need done. No AHJ, I think the reason areas fell out of sight, at least in California, was that it got too big for our britches. And coming in the other direction is a lot more effective. Because the fact is, we're not all that special. We just have a hobby that can be put to good use in times of emergency. And a lot of people are smart enough to recognize, oh, well, hey, maybe we ought to work with them. But it's got to be us approaching them with a request to let us know how we can help rather than telling them what we can do. And that coincides with you're given tasks and not a playbook HCEP exercise. Now, at the same time, the basic precepts of HCEP are you pay attention to the feedback and the lessons learned, and then you build your next operational training period on what you've learned. But none of us are experts. We're all drips.
A lot of our groups tend to overpromise, way overpromise, and they don't have enough people to fill all the promises that a lot of the groups have made. That is so true. And Gordon and Tom have their hands up. Tom.
Okay. Go ahead, Gordon.
So my local emergency management group volunteered themselves to be our evaluators in an exercise that we carried out a year ago. So they were actually the people scoring us, which was great because they saw everything that we did well and everything that we did poorly, and that give them a lot of chances to understand our capabilities and our weaknesses. And that has been one of the strongest ways I can get people to be more comfortable with our group, is just invite them to be an evaluator in one of our HCEP exercises. The gentleman, Dan, just brought up an excellent point. You know, we're here to do whatever they want. They run the show. I'm a volunteer. So what my local, thank you, someone who took my hand down, I appreciate that. What my local emergency manager came to me in the last 3-4 weeks and said, Gordon, I want to see your integrated preparedness plan. And I don't think what you've got meets that requirement. And I recommend that you hold an integrated preparedness planning workshop and that you review this chapter in the HCEP book and then come to us with a 3-year integrated preparedness plan. And so that's what I'm doing. The man told me what he wanted, and so doggone it, I'll do it.
And that makes you professional.
Okay, thank you very much, Gordon. I see Tom's hand up.
Yes, sir. There's a couple of things, but one of the main ones is apropos of what many people are getting close to, is to realize that sometimes managers want things that you can't do. And Barry was dead on point that we overpromise. And part of that overpromising I'd like to observe, although this is not my main point, is that the title the league has made up is an emergency communicator. So I traipsed around to several served agencies with appointments. I didn't show up out of the blue and disrupt their lives. I said, I just need 10 minutes to ask you a couple of questions. And I said, what should an emergency communicator be able to do for you? And not one of them said anything about radio. And, part of an immediate problem we have is that the league is helping to overpromise what we can do, because people have a view of what emergency communicators are that are unique to their needs. You wouldn't want to show up with a mutual assistance team and have the guy says, I'm so glad you're here. The hospital's telephone system went down because of flooding in the basement. Can you get it back up and running? And that's why they called you. They thought you could do that for them. Well, you put yourself dead in the trick bag. On the other extreme, most managers today, for reasons that we could talk about all week and shouldn't, they don't want radio operators. They don't want plumbers. They don't want electricians. They want the universal, all task, interchangeable labor unit. And that means that you'll show up because they call the radio team because what they really need is labor, and they couldn't get labor. So they call the radio team and they want you to set up cots, or they call the radio team, and on and on and on. And I've been told by some of these managers that we're too stuck on ourselves, that we won't do, what they need us to do. And my reply has been, when you pulled us out of staging to be labor, you made sure that there was no radio team for somebody who may need a radio team. We are not the solution to your internal lack of labor in your organization that accepted the task to do mass sheltering. And when I put it that way, this one manager pulled his horns in and actually apologized. But you're going to hit both extremes. Just because you're there and your title is wrong, you might be expected to do things you have no hope of being successful at. And also, some managers have gotten in the habit that everybody has to be an interchangeable, universal, all-task labor unit. And that's what they want you to be come hell or high water. And everybody amongst us should be able to. That's not a great role for amateur radio operators. It just, we've drug up, 100 or more miles from home with an extensive set of radio equipment, and they want us to set up cots or whatever it is. If it's sandbags and a place is about to go under, everybody throws sandbags. But to call us because we're the only people in staging is bananas. And to give in to that when they do it without politely telling them, this is not why these people came this far from home, and because you couldn't dig up enough labor from within your organization to do what you promised, you're calling us to do it. Being polite, not the way I'm saying it now, but saying by calling us out of the pool of resources available, you've made sure nobody else can use us, and we're not a labor team. And I don't know the solution to either one of those. I really don't. I'm saying that, those two things need to be looked at and addressed somehow. And to me, the biggest first step is for the league to get its head wrapped around what they want to promise we can do, and not call us emergency communicators when what we are is disaster radio operators. Okay, because that's what everybody's preparing to do. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the military slogan, train as you hope to fight, because you will fight as you have trained. And if you don't do that, you're setting yourself up for failure, and that will discredit you. It will discredit other amateur radio operators. It'll put you right in the trick bag. The league has to agree on a realistic title for what we do, and has to fix that blasted individual task book. I got news for you guys. Every single task book used in disaster preparedness is individual to the person it was issued to. It's the most useless word I've ever seen in a task book title in my life. Okay. But they've got to get the dispatch and arrival checklist out of there. A task book should be nothing other than a task book. And they're going to have to universalize some of the things they need us to be able to do. And if they need us to do, for instance, both narrow band emergency message system and WinLink, then say, well, that's what we need, and put them both in the task book. And then we'll know what to do and we'll come up to speed. But we got to do something to standardize things enough so that we can meet the need.
Okay, that's what we're trying to do here tonight. And I know it's gone more than an hour, and I can see some faces getting sleepy there. What I appreciate everyone's comments. I will try to summarize, put them on the shared site. I will also present those to the planning team, quite a few of which are in this particular discussion. They haven't spoken too much, but some of them have. So they know, they've heard from you exactly, so that's good. Dan, I guess if you're ready, the only thing I'd like to say is, if you thought this was worthwhile, put a note in the chat, put a note in the reflector, the IO group. It would be appreciated, and then we will know if something like this. I think we have to exchange more good things. Not necessarily the negative, but be more positive on, hey, this worked. This is what we should try. This is what you might want to try, and this is why it worked. So, and when we look to the future, to try to do more of that. So Dan, I think I've used up my time because people look like they're getting tired, especially those on the East Coast.
Well, just don't look at Oscar. His eyes are always shut like that.
I wasn't looking at Oscar particularly.
Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, I think we've had a pretty good session tonight. It certainly was better than I anticipated for something on the fly. I think we need to do more of this, and not only discuss what's good for us, what we do, our experiences, and share that, but work together so that we start working together, so that we can. I keep hearing that all disasters are local, and I'm the first one to have to disagree. Because if your disaster is local, you're in it, and your community is going to have to rely upon your neighbors. So the more we can share our experiences and utilize our skills and work together, the better it is for everybody. With that bunch of nonsense, I'm going to see if there's any more questions.
Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it. I hope everybody else got something out of this. I know I have about 3 pages of notes.
Wait a minute, we got, I see a hand up down here. I'm trying to see who it is. It's not showing up in my other. Trying to see who that is. Well, he just took it down. So,
well, I think this has been said before, but Dan, if your house burns down, it's a deployment. If my house burns down, it's a damn disaster. And the same,
it would be a hazmat incident.
That too. But the same applies to, cities and townships and counties. And I don't know, we take on a sacred obligation when we say we can help. And I think it's important that we live up to that. So thank you for doing this.
Well said,
Good night.
Ed, well said. Are there any other comments or questions out there?
Chat's got 86 into that I haven't gotten to.
I think we ought to do this again fairly soon after we get our arms around this and work on it from the planning team's perspective, so we can meet some of these needs that people are asking for. They give us a lot to work on, and I appreciate all that from all of you. So with that, unless somebody's got more to say or whatever, we'll just pull this short, and I'll get the video sent out to everybody along with the chat and all that stuff, and we'll carry on.
This was your presentation, people. Each of you that spoke up, it was your presentation.
One last comment. If anybody knows an amateur who's on the Starlink technical support team, give me a call.
Thank you all for coming. This was a really good discussion.
Oh, it has been. It has been. Well said, Barry.
Good evening, all.
Good evening, everyone. 73s.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, guys, for a great meeting.
Yeah, I respect everything that anybody said tonight because it was all sort of from their experience and their heart. I didn't see many egos popping up.
I put the Red Cross MOU in the chat if anyone was interested in seeing the latest one.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Hopefully it's improved.
It's changed. It has changed.
Good night, all.